Ich möchte Ihnen eine Geschichte erzählen, die mich bis heute nicht loslässt. Es ist die Geschichte eines Mannes, der glaubte, dass Liebe die Natur eines Raubtiers verändern kann. Es ist die Geschichte davon, wie ein Lebenstraum zum Albtraum wurde. Und es ist die Geschichte dessen, was sich am 15. Oktober 2019 in der kleinen Stadt Zanesville im Bundesstaat Ohio ereignete. Er hieß Terry Thompson. Er war 62 Jahre alt, Vietnam-Veteran, ein Mann mit einem guten Herzen und seltsamen Hobbys. Sein ganzes Leben lang hatte er davon geträumt, mit wilden Tieren zu leben. Nicht nur, um sie im Zoo zu beobachten, sondern um wirklich Teil ihrer Welt zu sein. Nach seinem Militärdienst kehrte Terry mit Medaillen und Narben auf der Seele nach Hause zurück. Wie viele Veteranen suchte er nach etwas, das die Leere in ihm füllen konnte. Und er fand es in den Augen wilder Tiere. Zuerst waren es normale Hunde, dann Wölfe und schließlich ein Tiger. Ken kaufte er 2003 als Kätzchen, klein, flauschig, mit riesigen blauen Augen. Terry benannte ihn nach seinem im Kampf gefallenen Kameraden. Er war so groß wie ein Hauskätzchen, erinnerte sich später seine Frau Marion. Terry trug ihn auf den Armen, fütterte ihn mit der Flasche und legte ihn neben sich schlafen. Die Farm der Thompsons lag am Rande der Stadt auf einem 20 Hektar großen Grundstück. Ein idealer Ort für jemanden, der fernab der Zivilisation leben wollte. Terry baute einen großen Käfig aus Metallstäben, aber Ken war selten darin zu finden. Die meiste Zeit verbrachte der Tiger im Haus wie ein gewöhnliches Haustier. Die Nachbarn waren daran gewöhnt, Terry mit seinem Kater auf dem Grundstück spazieren zu gehen. Ken lief an der Leine, spielte mit einem Ball und schlief auf dem Sofa im Wohnzimmer. Er war Teil der Familie, sagte Terry jedem, der es hören wollte. Er kennt mich seit meiner Kindheit. Wir verstehen uns ohne Worte. Aber der Tiger wuchs. Mit 3 Jahren wog Ken bereits 200 Kilogramm pure Muskeln und Instinkte. Seine spielerischen Kratzer hinterließen tiefe Schnitte an Terrys Armen. Seine sanften Bisse erforderten immer häufiger Krankenhausbesuche, um die Wunden zu nähen. Marion flehte ihren Mann an, das Tier loszuwerden, aber Terry blieb unnachgiebig. »Ihr versteht das nicht«, sagte er zu seinen Freunden. »Ken ist mein Sohn. Ich kann ihn nicht im Stich lassen. Er vertraut mir wie niemandem sonst auf der Welt.« Terry glaubte aufrichtig, dass zwischen ihm und dem Tiger eine besondere Verbindung bestand, die stärker war als die natürlichen Instinkte eines Raubtiers. Die ersten ernsthaften Warnsignale gab es 2018. Ken wurde aggressiver, vor allem beim Füttern. Einmal riss er Terry beim Spielen zu Boden und brach ihm 3 Rippen. »Er hat nur gespielt«, erklärte Terry den Ärzten. »Er wollte mir nicht wehtun. Es war ein Unfall.« Die örtlichen Behörden erhielten wiederholt Beschwerden von Nachbarn. Einige hatten gesehen, wie der Tiger unbeaufsichtigt auf dem Grundstück herumstreunte, andere hörten ihn nachts brüllen. Aber Terry fand immer einen Weg, sich mit den Behörden zu einigen. Er hatte alle erforderlichen Papiere und das Grundstück entsprach den Sicherheitsvorschriften. Marian verließ das Haus im Sommer 2019. Sie konnte die ständige Angst und den Geruch des Raubtiers im Haus nicht mehr ertragen. »Ich habe Terry geliebt«, sagte sie später gegenüber Journalisten. »Aber ich konnte nicht mit einem wilden Tier in einem Haus leben. Das war kein Zuhause, sondern eine tickende Zeitbombe.« Als er allein war, verbrachte Terry noch mehr Zeit mit Ken. Er redete stundenlang mit ihm, fütterte ihn aus der Hand und ließ ihn in seinem Bett schlafen. Nachbarn sagten, sie hätten gehört, wie er dem Tiger Schlaflieder vorgesungen habe. Der Mensch und das Raubtier lebten in ihrer eigenen abgeschotteten Welt, in der die Gesetze der Natur keine Gnade zu kennen schienen. Am Morgen des 15. Oktober 2019 änderte sich alles. Terry ging wie üblich, um Ken zu füttern. Der Tiger war in seinem Käfig. Am Abend zuvor hatte er sich aggressiv verhalten und Terry hatte beschlossen, vorsichtig zu sein. Aber als er die Tür öffnete, um den Napf mit Fleisch hineinzustellen, ging etwas schief. Vielleicht war Ken hungriger als sonst. Vielleicht weckte der Geruch von Blut auf dem Fleisch seinen Jagdinstinkt. Oder vielleicht erinnerte er sich einfach daran, wer er wirklich war. Der Tiger stürzte sich mit solcher Geschwindigkeit auf Terry, dass dieser nicht einmal Zeit hatte zu schreien. Die Nachbarn hörten gegen 8 Uhr morgens schreckliche Geräusche. Das Brüllen des Tigers vermischte sich mit Schmerzensschreien. Mrs. Henderson, die im Nachbarhaus wohnte, rief sofort die Polizei. »Ich werde diese Geräusche nie vergessen«, sagte sie später. Es war kein Brüllen, sondern etwas Dämonisches. Die Polizei traf 12 Minuten später ein. Die Beamten sahen Ken, der über dem regungslosen Körper seines Besitzers im Hof stand. Der Tiger war blutüberströmt, sein Maul und seine Pfoten waren rot. Er sah die Ankommenden ruhig an, als wäre nichts geschehen. Versuche, das Tier von der Leiche wegzujagen, blieben erfolglos. Ken knurrte und zeigte jedes Mal Aggression, wenn jemand versuchte, sich ihm zu nähern. Es war klar, dass er Terry als seine Beute betrachtete und nicht vorhatte, sie aufzugeben. Eine Stunde später traf ein Team von Spezialisten aus dem Zoo mit Betäubungsmitteln ein. Erst nachdem Ken betäubt worden war, konnten die Rettungskräfte Terry erreichen. Was sie sahen, war schrecklich. Der Tiger hatte den Mann, den er als seinen Sohn betrachtete, buchstäblich zerfleischt. Der Tod trat sofort durch einen Riss der Halsschlagader ein, aber Ken zerfleischte den Körper noch lange danach weiter. Die Autopsie ergab, dass Terry mehr als 40 Wunden von Klauen und Zähnen hatte. Ken verhielt sich genau wie jeder wilde Tiger, der sein Opfer tötet. Keine besondere Verbindung, keine Liebe. Nur die uralten Instinkte eines Raubtiers, die die Oberhand über 16 Jahre Leben an der Seite eines Menschen gewannen. Marian erfuhr von der Tragödie aus den Nachrichten. »Ich war nicht überrascht«, sagte sie zu den Reportern. »Ich wusste, dass das früher oder später passieren würde. Terry wollte es nicht verstehen, aber ein Tiger ist kein Hund. Er ist eine von der Natur geschaffene Tötungsmaschine.« Ken musste eingeschläfert werden. Die Tierärzte fanden nichts Ungewöhnliches an seinem Verhalten. Der Tiger verhielt sich einfach wie ein Tiger. Zoos lehnten seine Aufnahme aufgrund seiner Vorgeschichte als Angreifer eines Menschen ab. Die tödliche Spritze war die einzige humane Lösung. Die Geschichte von Terry und Ken erschütterte ganz Amerika. Tierschützer nutzten sie als Argument gegen die Haltung wilder Raubtiere in Privathaushalten. Die Behörden des Bundesstaates Ohio verschärften die Gesetze für exotische Tiere. Aber diese Maßnahmen konnten das Leben eines Mannes nicht mehr zurückbringen, der seinen Fehler zu spät erkannt hatte. Terrys Freunde erzählten, dass er in den letzten Monaten Veränderungen im Verhalten von Ken bemerkt hatte. Der Tiger wurde weniger verspielt, eher misstrauisch. Manchmal sah er Terry nicht als seinen Besitzer, sondern als potenzielle Beute an. Aber Terry glaubte weiterhin an seine besondere Verbindung zu dem Tier. Er glaubte, dass Liebe die Natur verändern kann, sagte Terrys bester Freund bei der Beerdigung. Er glaubte, er könne die Wildheit zähmen, aber Wildheit kann man nicht zähmen. Sie lebt im Blut, in den Genen, im Wesen eines Raubtiers. Psychologen, die den Fall untersuchten, kamen zu dem Schluss, dass Terry unter dem sogenannten Tarzan-Syndrom litt, der Illusion einer besonderen Verbindung zu wilden Tieren. Dieses Syndrom entwickelt sich ja häufig bei Menschen, die seit ihrer Kindheit Raubtiere aufziehen. Sie vergessen, dass das Tier trotz der Jahre, die es mit Menschen verbracht hat, wild bleibt. Tierärzte erklärten, dass Kens Verhalten absolut vorhersehbar war. Tiger leben in freier Wildbahn als Einzelgänger und betrachten jedes Lebewesen als potenzielle Bedrohung oder Beute. Selbst die Tigerin vertreibt ihre Jungen, wenn sie ausgewachsen sind. Der Begriff Familie und Treue ist ihrer Natur fremd. Neighbors said that Terry often referred to Ken as his boy and his son. He bought him expensive toys, celebrated his birthday, and talked to him like a child. But the tiger did not understand these human emotions. To him, Terry was simply a source of food, and ultimately food itself. The tragedy occurred at a time when Ken was particularly hungry. He hadn't eaten for 2 days due to digestive problems. The smell of meat on Terry awakened his hunting instinct. At that moment, 16 years of living together vanished into thin air. All that remained were the instincts of a predator and its prey. Animal behavior experts say that Ken felt no malice or aggression toward Terry. He was simply following his nature. The tiger did not understand that he was killing the man who fed and cared for him. For him, it was a normal hunt, one that had been ingrained in his genes by millions of years of evolution. After the tragedy, Terry's house stood empty for a long time. Marion sold it a year later. The new owners demolished the cage and converted the site into a regular farm. But the locals still remember the tiger's roar, which reminded them every night that wildness cannot be tamed. The story of Terry and Ken became a warning to anyone who dreams of living alongside wild predators. It showed that human love cannot change the nature of an animal, that there will always be a gulf between humans and tigers that cannot be bridged by any feelings. I thought about this story for a long time, trying to understand what drove Terry. Perhaps he was looking for something in the wild that he couldn't find among people. Perhaps he wanted to prove to himself and the world that he was capable of something impossible. Or maybe he just loved animals so much that he forgot to be careful. But nature does not forgive mistakes. It knows no mercy or leniency. A tiger remains a tiger no matter how many years it has lived alongside humans. Its claws and teeth are designed to kill, and its instincts are designed to survive. And no amount of love can change that fact. As I studied this story, I realized that Terry was not a villain, but a victim of his own illusions. He sincerely believed in what he was doing. He thought he was saving Ken by giving him a home and a family. But in reality, he was dooming both himself and the animal to tragedy. Ken was also a victim in this story. He was deprived of the opportunity to live in the wild. But he couldn't become a pet either. He existed in a limbo where his natural instincts were suppressed by human care, and in the end, those instincts took over. This story taught me an important lesson. We cannot change the nature of wild animals, no matter how much we love them. We can admire them, study them, and protect their habitat, but we must remember that they remain wild, and that is where their beauty and danger lie. Terry Thompson wanted to live in harmony with nature, but he forgot that harmony is only possible with mutual respect and an understanding of boundaries. He crossed those boundaries and paid the ultimate price. His story is a reminder that love without wisdom can be deadly. Today, as I tell you this story, I want you to remember, wild animals are beautiful precisely because they are wild. Our task is not to tame them, but to learn to live with them in peace, maintaining the distance that nature itself has created. While working on this investigation, I spoke to dozens of people who knew Terry and Ken. Each of them told their own version of events, but they all agreed on one thing. The tragedy was inevitable. Dr. Susan Marks, a specialist in big cat behavior, agreed to give me an interview. "I've seen hundreds of cases like this," she said, leafing through a thick folder of documents. "People think that if they raise a predator from childhood, the animal will see them as part of the pack. But big cats have no concept of a pack. They are loners by nature." Dr. Marks explained to me that tigers in captivity often exhibit what is known as delayed predatory behavior. They can live alongside humans for years without showing any aggression, then suddenly attack. "It's like a time bomb," she said. "No one knows what will trigger it." Jim Harrison, Terry's neighbor, told me about the day he first saw Ken. "It was about 10 years ago. I was driving past their house and saw Terry playing in the yard with... At first I thought it was a big dog, but then I realized it was a tiger. A real damn tiger." "Terry was a good man," Jim continued, nervously twisting his cap in his hands. "He helped his neighbors, never hurt anyone. But his passion for wild animals, we all knew it would end badly. No one just had the courage to tell him." Local veterinarian Michael O'Connor had repeatedly warned Terry about the danger. "I treated Ken since he was a child," he told me. "At first it was routine vaccinations, then treatment for injuries Terry sustained while playing with the tiger. I told him many times that it would end badly. The last time I saw Ken was a month before the tragedy," Dr. O'Connor recalled. "Terry brought him in for a checkup. The tiger weighed 230 pounds and was in great shape, but I saw something disturbing in his eyes. He didn't look at me like a pet, but like a wild predator." Terry always dismissed the warnings. "He said Ken was special," the veterinarian said. that they had a special bond. I tried to explain to him that a tiger is not a dog, that it has completely different instincts. But Terry wouldn't listen. County Sheriff Matt Lansing remembers all the calls related to the Thompson farm. Over the past 3 years, we've received complaints almost every month, he said. The tiger escaped from the property. Neighbors heard suspicious noises, but Terry always assured us that everything was under control. The law was on his side, the sheriff explained. He had all the permits, the property met the requirements. We couldn't just take the animal away from him, although, to be honest, I would have gladly done so. An incident that occurred 6 months before the tragedy was particularly alarming. Ken managed to escape from his cage and wandered around the neighborhood for several hours. The local school was closed due to quarantine, and residents did not leave their homes. Terry found the tiger in the woods, sleeping peacefully under a tree. Terry was thrilled, said Jennifer Rogers, a teacher at the local school. He told everyone that Ken just wanted to go for a walk, like a normal cat, that he didn't attack anyone because he knows that people are friends. But we knew we were just lucky. After the incident, state authorities began to monitor the Thompson farm more closely. Inspector Robert Wilson regularly visited to check on Ken's living conditions. Formally, everything was in order, he admitted. The cage met standards, the tiger had a medical record, and Terry kept detailed feeding records. But I saw how they interacted, the inspector continued. Terry treated Ken like a child. He petted him, talked to him, let him lick his face. And the tiger looked at him like he was food. I've seen that look in wild predators many times. Terry's ex-wife, Marion, agreed to meet me at a cafe on the outskirts of town. She looked tired and aged. I still blame myself, she said without looking up. Maybe if I had stayed, if I had kept fighting him. Ken wasn't just a pet, Marion said. He was Terry's obsession. My husband spent more money on him than on our family. He bought the best meat, expensive vitamins, toys, and I had to make do with the leftovers. The last year of our life together was a nightmare, she admitted. Ken became huge and aggressive. He growled at me when I was cooking in the kitchen. Terry laughed and said the tiger was just jealous. But I saw a killer in his eyes. Marion found the nights particularly difficult. Ken slept in our bedroom, on the floor next to the bed. I lay there listening to him breathe, smelling the predator. Sometimes I woke up and saw him staring at me in the dark, those yellow eyes. I couldn't take it anymore. Talking to child psychologist Dr. Alice Carter helped me understand what was driving Terry. Many people, especially those who have experienced trauma, seek unconditional love, she explained. They think that a wild animal will love them truly, without lies or betrayal. Terry was a war veteran, Dr. Carter continued. He saw a lot of violence and lost friends. Maybe in Ken he was looking for the buddy he lost in Vietnam, someone who would never betray him. But nature knows nothing of human emotions. Ethologist David Stevens, who studies the behavior of big cats, explained the mechanism of the tragedy to me. A tiger perceives the world through the prism of survival, he said. There is prey, there is danger, there is territory. Human concepts of love and loyalty are alien to him. Ken had no feelings for Terry, the scientist continued. He was just used to a source of food. But at a critical moment, when he was hungry, excited, or frightened, ancient instincts kicked in, and Terry went from being a source of food to prey. Witnesses to the tragedy still cannot forget that morning. Emergency medical technician Thomas Green was the first to arrive at the scene. I've seen a lot of deaths in my career, he told me, but what that tiger did to Terry, it wasn't murder, it was hunting. Ken stood over the body like a victor, the paramedic recalled. He didn't look angry or upset. He was calm, as if he was just doing what he was meant to do. When we tried to approach, he growled and bared his teeth. It was clear that this was his prey. Police officer Dan Miller, who fired the tranquilizer, described Ken's last moments. He resisted the tranquilizer for a long time, he said. Even under the influence of the drug, he continued to guard Terry's body. Only when he was completely unconscious were we able to retrieve the remains. The scariest thing was that the tiger didn't look sick or rabid. The officer continued. He was just doing what a tiger is supposed to do, killing and eating. It was natural to him. Ken's autopsy revealed no abnormalities. The tiger was healthy, well fed, and showed no signs of stress or illness. It was a normal tiger that behaved like a normal tiger, concluded the veterinary pathologist. The problem was not with the animal, but with the situation. Experts agree that hunger was the trigger for the attack. Ken hadn't eaten for 2 days due to an upset stomach. When Terry brought him fresh meat, the smell of blood awakened his hunting instinct. At that moment, 16 years of living together ceased to exist. A tiger doesn't remember who fed it, explained zoopsychologist Mark Roberts. It lives in the moment, and at that moment, Terry became an obstacle between it and food, an obstacle that had to be removed. After the tragedy, Ohio state authorities radically revised their laws on keeping exotic animals. Now, to obtain a license, you have to go through a complex procedure that includes psychological testing. Terry's story was the last straw, admitted Senator John Mahoney, one of the authors of the new law. The local community has also changed since the tragedy. We used to think of Terry's hobby as eccentric, said Mayor William Davis. Now we realize it was a time bomb that could have exploded at any moment and killed not only him, but innocent people as well. Schools have introduced special programs to teach children safety rules when encountering wild animals. We want our children to understand the difference between pets and predators, explained school principal Sarah Johnson. Interestingly, after Terry's death, several more exotic animals were found on his farm. 2 wolves, a lynx, and several poisonous snakes. All of them were confiscated and transferred to specialized reserves. Terry collected wild animals as a collector, said a nature conservation inspector. Marion still receives letters from people who blame her for her husband's death. They say that if I hadn't left Terry, he would still be alive, she said. But I know the truth. Sooner or later, it would have happened anyway. Ken was a ticking time bomb. Terry's funeral was a real ordeal for his family. Journalists from all over the world came to cover the story of the man who was killed by his own tiger. Marion had to hire security to protect the ceremony from curious onlookers. Terry was a good man with bad decisions, said Pastor James Walker at the funeral. He wanted to love and be loved. Unfortunately, he looked for that love in the wrong places. Terry's grave is in a local cemetery next to a Vietnam War memorial. The headstone is engraved with the words, "Loving husband and friend to animals." Marion argued with the stonemason for a long time about the last words, but in the end, she agreed. "It's true," she said. "He really loved animals. Too much." Ken was cremated immediately after the autopsy. His ashes were not released to the family. Under state law, the remains of an animal that has killed a human must be destroyed. "It's the right thing to do," Marion said. "I don't want anything to remind me of that day." 5 years after the tragedy, Terry's house stands empty. The new owners have tried to sell it several times, but buyers refuse to buy it once they learn the story. Who would want to live in a house where a man was killed by a tiger, say local real estate agents? Children in the town still tell scary stories about Ken's ghost wandering around the neighborhood. Adults know it's nonsense, but they prefer to give the abandoned farm a wide berth. There's a spirit of death there, say the old-timers. The story of Terry and Ken has become a subject of study at universities. Psychology students analyze the motives behind human behavior, while future veterinarians study the instincts of predators. This is a classic case of misunderstanding animal nature, say professors. A documentary film about the tragedy, released a year later, won several awards at international festivals. But Marion refused to participate in the filming. "I don't want to profit from my husband's death," she explained. "Let his story be a warning, not entertainment." Animal rights activists used Terry's story as an argument against keeping wild predators in captivity. Ken was just as much a victim as Terry, they say. He was deprived of his natural habitat and condemned to a life in a cage. But there is another point of view. Some experts believe that Terry saved Ken from certain death. The kitten was the product of illegal breeding, says biologist Lisa Gardner. He would not have survived in the wild. Terry gave him 16 years of life. Today, there are more tigers in private hands in the US than there are in the wild worldwide. Most of them live in conditions that are far from ideal. Terry's story is just a drop in the ocean, say zoologists. Dozens of similar tragedies happen every year. I finished my investigation, but the story of Terry and Ken continues to haunt me. Every time I see a big cat at the zoo, I think of that morning in Ohio, of a man who loved wildlife too much, and of a tiger who simply followed his instincts. Perhaps the tragedy was inevitable from the start. Perhaps Terry sealed his fate the day he brought home a little tiger cub, but he acted out of love, albeit misguided love, and that makes his story even more tragic. In the end, we are all looking for love and understanding. Terry sought them in the embrace of a wild predator and paid for it with his life. His story is a reminder that love without wisdom can be deadly dangerous, and that wild nature is beautiful precisely because it remains wild.